Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Weisheit, licensed clinical social worker. It's a reason why that's important. So thank you for being here. As I welcome in Jessica Domingue, licensed clinical social worker. Thanks for being here. And Karen Schilling, licensed clinical social worker. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
There's a reason why there are three social workers here on the panel today. And the reason is because we are all very proud social workers as we celebrate National Social Work Month here in the month of March. We get the whole month, and there's kind of a reason for that. So Karen, I'd kind of like to start with you because people sometimes have a different perspective of where they work and what they do based on where they go to school. So I would like the tiger, one of two tigers on the set, to tell us a little bit about your work, your school history and work history.
Well, for me, I had been very rooted at LSU. I had gotten an undergraduate degree there and had some pretty strong ties to the university. But I remember my first thought about going to social work was from a professor who talked about, in my undergraduate years, about how much he admired social workers, that they really got in and did some of the real dirty, intense work. And that was Dr. Edmund Timmons with the Department of Psychology at LSU. And he took us on a couple of field trips where we were able to go to the back wards of some of the state hospitals. And I saw some social workers in action. And so before I got a degree in psychology, realized that wasn't going to get me to a place where I really wanted to be. I applied to the School of Social Work, took the graduate registry exam and got in. And so I continued my education at LSU and focused on some community organization type of curriculum there with a minor in work with individuals and families. And frankly, that has just really allowed me to have a very broad base and stimulated an interest for me in so many different aspects of social work that has just been a real joy for me. I spent a little over 40 years in social work. I've just recently retired about six weeks ago.
6 wonderful weeks ago.
Retirement is something everyone should try sooner than later. But I don't feel that I have retired from social work, from being a social worker.
Right.
I feel like I've retired from going to a job, to an office every day. And now I'm able to pick and choose and do some of the advocacy work and some of the dirty work, just helping people have enough food. I planted seeds with the food bank, with the community garden a few weeks ago. So I feel like I'm going to continue to be drawn to those types of helping activities, and I'm open to those activities. But it is a pleasure to be retired. And it's a pleasure to be retired from a profession that I felt has been very good to me and has really allowed me to experience a huge, huge variety of different roles as a social worker.
Oh, very cool. And so for those of us who are still working, Jessica, I'll let you kind of tell us a little bit about you and kind of the path and how you ended up going back for graduate school.
So Jessica Domingue, LCSW. I have a bachelor's degree in family consumer science from Nicholls State University. And after I graduated, I actually worked at Terrebonne General. And one of my mentors was Penny Brooks. I know one of our near and dear friends. And so about 5 or 6 months into that job, Penny said, you really need to go get your master's degree in social work. And so on a whim, I applied to LSU and I got in. And so I went to graduate school at LSU. I finished up my master's, and then I came back to Houma and I took a job for a hospice agency. I did that work for a little while, and then I started doing some community-based work, working with families and children at some other agencies. Became licensed. I did a private practice for a while, and then now I'm back in community-based social work. And then, this really weird thing happened, and I decided to run for office. And so, now I am proudly the only social worker in the state of Louisiana who serves as an elected official. And so that's a really big accomplishment. And it's a big accomplishment for social work. And it just shows that we can do so much. And, all of that education and all of those experiences, it does help us to work on a macro level. And so I always remind myself that rather than having a caseload of 100, I have a caseload of 100,000. And so that's kind of the way I keep it in perspective, and I keep myself grounded. And always I go back to those social work principles and remember, we do have a code of ethics. There's reasons why we can and can't do things. And so it really helps with where I am right now.
And so it's really interesting that the different paths that you guys have taken. And, one of the things, and we talked about this early on, is that in school, and we'll talk about mine a little later, but they had either a direct service track or administration planning and organization track. And so y'all have that at LSU as well? It was a little different,
It
right?
was a little different. You basically chose geriatric path, addiction path, or children and families.
Okay.
And so at that point, originally when I first started graduate school, I thought I was going to be in addictions.
Okay.
And then I had some very close personal losses in addictions. I had some real tragic things happen in my life. And so I decided addictions wasn't quite for me.
Okay.
And so then I went on to the children and families path and really specialized in trauma.
Okay.
And so my career has been in trauma ever since I graduated.
And so it's really interesting. For me, in my path, as I'm sitting here with two esteemed tigers, for me, when I finished, I was in psychology at Nichols. I went to school at Nichols, and I was challenged by Dr. Jim Butler.
Oh, yeah.
And Doc said, Keith, I need you to do something for me today. I'm like, what's that, Doc? He said, teach class. I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, I want you to just teach class. This is what it's going to be on. So he gave me about 2 minutes to kind of peruse what he was going to do, and I taught class for him. When we finished class, he said, now, you've just proven that you can do things pretty quickly. You need to go farther than just what you plan on doing here at Nichols. And you've got the option to go, you can go to graduate school in psychology, or you can go in social work. I recommend, just like your teacher did, I recommend social work, because you can do so many different things with that. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and not that psychologists aren't wonderful people. Believe me, I celebrated a lot of them this past 2 weeks as part of the caring community. But being a social worker means that you're trained in so many different aspects that it kind of allows you to have a good base knowledge about how to do so many different things. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are over 40 different fields of social work that people can go into. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I looked at the direct service piece, and we had to choose either direct service or administration planning and organization. APO scared me a little bit. It seemed to be a little too big for me. Ironically enough, I went through direct service, and I chose health and mental health to kind of focus on. And that's where I've spent most of my career. I got my roots where all three of us got some of our roots at the Terrebonne General Medical Center back then, Terrebonne General Health System now. But all three of us did some of that work. Karen, let's talk about how that felt for you. But that wasn't your beginning. Terrebonne General wasn't your start.
No, when I first got out of school, I got a job with a state agency doing children, youth, and family work, child protection, those kinds of things. And my job was to reunify families that had been separated because of abuse and neglect, and to help coach parents, to do the things they needed to get their children back in their families.
And I think that's a good clarification. I want people to hear this, that your job was to unite families.
Yeah.
And so social workers, I think, so very often are seen as the bad guys, and they're going to come in and do what?
Yeah, check your house and take away your children.
Do the
and that
white
kind of
glove
thing,
check.
yeah.
But that's not what you were doing. Your job was to reunite, to find
Right,
ways
and-
to help teach them.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of teaching and a lot of role modeling and things like that. And I'd done an internship in that area. Mm-hmm. And then the Bayou Oaks Hospital, psychiatric hospital, ended up opening shortly after, within 3 or 4 years after I'd started working for the state. And so then I was greatly challenged to go and work in a psychiatric hospital. And there were a few times that I thought, oh my gosh, there's a lot. So I would say that I got a huge degree in learning from all of us. We had never worked in such a place, but I'm still approached by people that say, you really helped me. And so I'm rewarded in knowing that. And then I had an opportunity to do a dual work situation with Bayou Oaks and with Terrebonne General. Worked as a social worker in the critical care unit of the hospital, as well as in the ER. And that was just a very difficult job, but a very rewarding job. One of my one of the jobs today that I just absolutely loved was to help families through the loss process when they had family members who were passing away, and to talk with them about organ donation. It was just more like a ministry for me than anything else, and it's still one of the things. And we have a good friend who's a social worker who devotes her life to doing organ LOPA work.
Right.
And then from there, I worked a short time for Chabert, and then landed in the location where I retired from with the South Central Louisiana Human Services Authority, and had a lot of opportunity there to do some things that I'd never done before. Helping to develop a class for law enforcement officers on mental health and behavioral health issues, and how to help them maybe do their jobs a little bit more informed. And then I've just been blessed to serve on boards as a result of having some very broad interest in social work. So all of these experiences have really provided me with a platform that I could do so much in the field of social work, and help a number of people in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, and so Jessica, let's start a little bit with you. You had been in the job, gotten your degree at Child and Family Services, working at Terrebonne General, and then inspired by your discussion with Penny about going back. Mm-hmm. And then once you finished your degree, let's talk a little bit about where that took you.
So I finished in 2010, and I went and worked for a local hospice agency. And I did that work for about a year. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went and worked for a community agency, and I did case management services with children. And so basically what we would do is we would go into the home, we would work with children and families, whatever the need was, whether it was behavioral or whether it was trauma or whatever was going on at that time. So I did that work, became licensed. I did some clinic-based work, and then, like I said earlier, I did private practice for several years, and I did only trauma therapy. And after a while, I mean, that just became very isolating for me.
Right.
And so I needed that connection with other professionals, and I wasn't quite getting what I needed in order to fill my cup and to move forward. And so I went and did more agency work, and then, of course, like I said earlier, it landed me here to where I am now. As
our paths, we've talked a little bit, have crossed over the years, and Karen, who kind of started at the hospital and worked in the hospital system, all three of us have worked at Terrebonne General and learned quite a bit, but we also learned about the opportunities to take care of people in other areas. And so there's so many different people that work in different professions. You know, one of the things that they told us was the pillars of social work at Southern University at New Orleans was empowerment, advocacy, and transformation. And those seemed like these huge ideas to me. And one of our teachers said, let me break it down very, very simply for you. Before you can go out and do all three of those really big words, you got to find a way to make it simple. With EAT, sometimes you just got to help people eat. And both of you had the same reaction to that. Both of you said, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so as we learned that it's interesting that that's one of the basic things that I think we probably learned working through a hospital system, that we come across some people that don't have their basic needs met. And that's where social work really steps in.
I think one of the basic things that I learned, in graduate school is that a way to help people open up and talk is feed them. Take care of their basic needs, and it helps to establish that trusting relationship. And boy, that followed me. People would come to the hospital hungry. They might not want to cooperate with us, because they were hungry or they were needing something. And in all the different settings that I worked, if you provide for their basic needs, then they can eventually tell you what the real need, other than eating, is, what their particular need for mental health or health or whatever, but they start to open up to you. So, basic needs, and we know all too well right now about people's basic needs that have gone unmet because of the hurricane situation that we were in just recently, and we still are in some areas in this community.
Right.
So, I think it's the basis of, relationship building.
Wow, yeah, and that can be that starting point. And Jessica, for you spent a lot of time really helping some of the very difficult people through trauma recovery. Mm-hmm. And that is so taxing. You know, Karen and I both have spent some time doing work in those fields. I've done the hospice thing for me. Karen does some direct work with children's and adoptions. And so that trauma work, I know the average length of time in any given career for a social worker is 5 years. And the reason is because we tackle some of those really heavy, some of those really difficult things.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I ran for office was because I wanted to help people and because I had that passion to be able to help people. And then getting into office, being a trauma therapist and being a therapist who works with small children, I saw a need to heal trauma on a more macro level.
Right.
And I thought, how can we as a community help to heal trauma? And so one of those ways to heal trauma is by play. And so if you guys know me, I've been so adamant and so passionate about our recreation system and ways that we can improve recreation and improve, neighborhood parks and things like that. And so for me, the way to heal trauma in our community, and there's a lot of trauma in this community, a lot of trauma that we don't speak about and we see. And so if we can help children, we can help our community. And so that was kind of my motivation to even get involved in the first place. And then, of course, the last 2 years have just been such complex trauma because we had the COVID situation and now we've had the hurricane. And so when you say basic needs, I mean, what we have to think about now is, do you have a roof over your head? And that may be a real question to ask somebody or to ask a child. Where are you sleeping tonight? What is it that you're eating? Do you have dinner at home? Do you have clean clothes? Is the water running? Do you have power? So we really, as social workers, are so important right now in healing our community that we just need to go back to the basics. And those basic needs of people is where we really need to start.
I love it, and I know how passionate you've been about recreation and recreation options in our community, and a lot of that is because very often if people do what we call play therapy, they're actually healing while they're doing something. And it's so awesome to be able to see. And what happens for families who do that and go out and enjoy recreation, they can actually get a bit of a relief from all of the things that may be difficult about maybe sleeping in a car, not having running water, not having electricity or a roof.
And one of the modalities in the hospital was recreation therapy or activity therapy. And, a lot of times that might have been ceramic work or doing things with their hands, music therapy. But sometimes when you take away a lot of that stress and you have people occupied with different things, they're able to open up about what might really be bothering them. As I was listening to Jessica and talking about all the different things that social workers do, it reminded me of our huge network of social workers, not only in Terrebonne Parish, but in our region, the Houma Thibodeau region. And I think that over the years, the relationships that I've developed with all my friends in social work, when I was stumped with any kind of a need that I knew someone else had more expertise with, there was nothing for me to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, can you help me with this particular thing? And they would do the same thing, call me and say, let's have a little consultation section here, and or after a social work meeting, we would all huddle up and say, this is our concern, this is something that we have a question about, and we would start problem solving. We're problem solvers.
That's what we do. Got 10 seconds. Tell me what your last final thoughts are about social workers.
Social workers are incredible need in this community, and we have unmet needs. And I just want to let people know that myself and Mr. John Navy are working on some big projects so that we can meet some of those unmet needs in this community.
We appreciate it very much. Thank y'all for joining us.
Well, thanks for asking us. Happy
you.
Social Work
That's
Month.
right. And happy Social Work Month to everybody who is a social worker. Thank the social workers in your life. They do a great job. That will do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming on HTV.